Hey, welcome everyone. Hey, this is a podcast that explores various aspects of addiction, potentially focusing on personal stories of recovery, scientific perspectives, societal impacts, or related topics. This podcast often features discussion with experts, individuals in recovery, therapists, and advocates to offer insights and support to those affected by addiction or seeking more information about it. Welcome to another episode of The Other Side of Addiction. I am your host, Al Richards, and today with our guest, Andy Chudd, we're going to be talking about what it's like growing up in the 60s. This is really going to be an interesting show. Andy, thank you so much, my friend, for taking time out of your morning to be with us today. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure, Al. It's an honor. It's an honor, really.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I was following some of your stuff on social media and I saw that you was sharing some stuff about addiction and I'm like, I got to reach out to this guy and you didn't even hesitate. I reached out to you, said, hey, would you be interested? And you're like, absolutely. And chatting here just a little bit for about 10 minutes before we started the show. I'm really intrigued to see where this goes because what you shared already just is something amazing. So, what was it like growing up in the 60s?
Well, I mean, it was a unique situation. The 60s, I wouldn't trade it for anything. I actually was born in 1950. I was raised in the music business. My dad owned a record company. I was in recording studios from the time I was five and around musicians. And to this day, regardless of what I've done in my life, music is a huge part of my life. It doesn't matter if I'm working out in the gym, I'm listening to music. I'm driving in my car, I'm listening to music. And I pride myself on the fact that I have a pretty wide scope of musical tastes. But in that, things in as I grew into my teen years, um, I was exposed to drugs. My parents were social drinkers, um, and my generation were social users. I mean, the difference is the marijuana that I used to get for $10 a bag, no stems, no seeds, in 1965, when I was 15. Now it's such a huge dichotomy in the strength of the drugs because of all of the gene splicing and all those things. I'm thankful that I quit long before all that came into play because I just wanted that fuzzy buzz. And as time went on, as I aged into 16, 17, it was marijuana, hashish, a variety of pills, but nothing, more like Valium and things like that, and LSD. And once again, that wasn't a drug. That was a social experiment. It was how we explore our inner being. And once again, I don't view it that way today, but that was a very real belief to me in those days.
You know,
As
and
I
and and to pause you just for a second, Andy,
sure.
I think things are definitely different nowadays because hearing what you're saying, do you really feel that the majority of the people in the 60s, it was just like a social thing, right? We were just people in that era was just trying to figure out who they were and they wanted to get deeper into themselves, correct? Not basically doing it because they were sexually molested by a parent or a family member, or they had some other kind of trauma. Not like it is nowadays where people are using these things as a band-aid to help cover up their pain that they're suffering.
Well, yeah, like today, and I don't mean to. I have friends that have used ayahuasca and things like that, peyote, and all in the same belief that I had when I was 16 using LSD. Um, and you know, the amazing thing is the metamorphosis that some of these people have gone through. I mean, like totally changed people. They quit their jobs and do all that stuff. My viewpoint, obviously, in recovery is I don't know that that's the best thing for you. But once again, it was the social in Los Angeles. I can't, you know, I've spent the last almost 50 years in Utah, so I've had a lot of time to talk to people. They grew up in the 60s as well, but there wasn't that division of kind of like the long hairs and the student uh, groups. It was pretty much everybody was social, and marijuana was commonplace, and there wasn't a lot of people getting arrested. There were safe places to go and use, and um, it was I don't look back at that as a negative part of my life. So it's hard to describe to people when they say, well, you were using, you were doing this, you were doing that. And I said, yeah, but once again, um, the times dictated what we were doing. We had Democrats and Republicans in the 60s. And, I mean, 1968, the Democratic Convention was a huge thing to, at my point in my life, a liberal like me. But, people change, mores change. The bottom line about all of this is it's different today. Once again, we didn't have the electronics that, I mean, I'm addicted to it. I'm on it right now.
Yeah.
You know, I don't go anywhere without my phone. My first cell phone was in 1985 here in Utah, and it was in a briefcase. And when the phone would ring in Denny's, I'd have to open it up, put up the antenna, and answer the phone. It was like Get Smart, the TV show.
Yeah, James Bond crap there.
It was unbelievable. The reason that I had that phone is my boss wanted to be able to track me down and talk to me immediately because I was in the financial services industry, and I would be at one meeting and he'd be at another, and he wanted to be able to stay in touch. But things change.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is an addiction.
Absolutely.
A sense of the word, because if you take it away from my grandkids or my kids or me, I'm walking around, where's my phone?
Yeah, yeah, you're in a panic. Yeah, yeah,
I was the same way about my drugs.
yeah. You saying with the pot, I didn't even start smoking pot till 2 weeks before I graduated high school. And
Well,
this was 1981. And,
uh,
I remember the first time that I tried it. I was up at a ski resort. I was doing some summer skiing. One of the guys that we went to school with was an instructor up there, and we got in his camper and we actually smoked it out of a Coke can. We made a little pipe. It was the
yeah,
first time I had ever done it.
uh,
And you're right. I think the THC level back in those days, even in my days, I think it was like around the 5 to 10 or 12%. You mentioned earlier with the way the genetics and everything has gone. I mean, this stuff is almost like 70 to 80%.
it
And
is in,
it's totally insane. And you know, I think I was maybe kind of like you in a way. I didn't do it. I finally was just curious and I did it. I mean, I had a dad that was hard on me, but not to the point to where I wanted to numb myself. It was just something I just wanted to do. And most of my friends didn't do it, just certain people that I knew in certain crowds. And I tried it and I remember how amazing I felt. It was pretty cool, especially the first time I tried cocaine. I mean, I fell in love immediately. It
yeah,
was it was like having sex for the first time. I guess it was like, my gosh, this is amazing.
Oh yeah.
know, and I was at a Super Bowl party probably, oh my gosh, 16, 17 years ago. I had already stopped smoking pot. At that time, I was still doing cocaine here and there. And I ate some cookies at the Super Bowl party, chocolate chip cookies, and they were about that big around
Huh?
and they tasted amazing. So I ate about 4 of them. I went and sat back down on the couch, and my wife at the time, I guess her sister saw me and went in and said, "There's something wrong with Al."
Oh,
And she came in. I was sitting on that couch. I had sweat just pouring off me. My heart felt like it was literally going to come right out of my chest. I mean, like maybe I snorted a whole freaking bag of cocaine all in one sitting.
wow.
And I couldn't figure out what the hell was going on with me. It scared the living shit out of me. Come to
Oh yeah.
find out, there was pot in those cookies.
Now, were those commercially produced or one of your friends?
No, no. So one of the family members of the people that I was at, it was actually my wife's sister's husband. So her brother-in-law, his cousin made them, mixed them all up, got all the stuff, made them and brought them to the Super Bowl party, but they never said anything. So someone who, and I mean, I don't think cookies back in the 60s, if it was made back then, would have done that to you.
Oh, we didn't. Well, first of all, we didn't. We- Brownies, no cookies. Brownies,
Okay, brownies.
plus brownies. There was a big push for that, um, and primarily with baked stuff. Like you, pot was like the fuzzy buzz. If you wanted to get higher, it was hash or hash oil. And hash oil was my first experience with a Coke can. But you want to remember, I'm old enough that Coke cans back then weren't aluminum. They were
No, they were
they were
steel.
tough, you know. So we'd have to get a hammer out and pound it, and then punch holes in it. But that was that was my first experience with smoking it that way. We had water pipes. We had we rolled our own joints. We actually there was a brand of tobacco called Bugle, and Bugle had this deal, and it was like one of these deals where you put the paper in and the pot, and you lick it and go like this, and you'd have a finished joint. So I mean, there were so many things, but it was commonplace. I mean, people. I carried drugs in my pocket. I carried um, I didn't start smoking until I was 18, but I was smoking pot when I was 15. So, things were different. But in the music business, being around bands uh, in the 60s, especially 66, 67, 68, drugs were so prevalent. If you went to San Francisco and you were from LA, you didn't have any problem scoring, none. There were 3 um, venues for music that were pretty famous, and that was the Fillmore and the Avalon Ballroom, and then Golden Gate Park was real famous. I mean, like George Harrison just showed up one day in Golden Gate Park, and people were giving him acid and stuff like that. But it was, I mean, today he'd have to have guards all around him just to sit down and play guitar because people would be converging on him. It was much mellower. It was, you know, don't get me wrong. I grew up with the Watts riots. I grew up with the '68 Democratic Convention, so I saw violence, but I didn't experience it on a daily basis. You know, and hanging with my friends that were from South Central LA. We'd go down there. Nobody was like, "Hey, Whitey, get out of here." It wasn't like that. So uh, those times, the social get together. We'd sit down like our parents would sit down and have drinks. We'd sit down and smoke a joint. We'd sit down and smoked some pot. And then by the time I was 17 years old, I was introduced to this drug called cocaine, which in the recording studio made me feel I was more creative, made me feel like Superman. I could do anything. And I mean, I have a hole in my septum to this day from that use, which didn't stop until 1986. So you're talking 20 years of use. And yet, having been around recovery now for 25 years, actually longer than that, because my wife will have 38 years. So I was really around it with her, going to meetings and stuff with her. And the stories that I heard just weren't congruent with the way I grew up. It's like, well, I was discussing with you earlier, people would be in meetings and people I dealt with, people I sponsored would tell me, well, because of this, it was bad. You know, I understand that addiction took hold at one time or another, but to get to addiction, we had to enjoy ourselves or we would have stopped. You know, that was my biggest thing. So, but the drugs that I was around, I mean, fortunately for me, I lived through doing things like a lot of cocaine and a lot of quaaludes, a lot of cocaine and a little bit of heroin. And in my mind, I was functioning fine. Obviously, it was like when you were sitting on that sofa and you were sweating profusely and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps you didn't think things were looking as bad on the outside as they were actually doing. That was my situation. I mean, I would be taking my life in my hands on a daily basis. It took a long time for me to admit, once I went through treatment, once I started going to meetings, I bet you I was 5 years sober before I started saying, my name's Andy and I'm an alcoholic. I was insistent that I wasn't an alcoholic, I was an addict. And a couple of sponsors in, one a good deal more humble than me sat me down and said, look, man, why are you fighting this? You're an addict, you're an alcoholic, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. If you believe that this program is saving your life, you don't need to define yourself. And I believe that program, my wife and some really amazing people, not only saved my life, but gave me the ability to believe in a higher power. And I mean, you know, step by step, right? Little by slowly, things happen. And things in my life were pretty grandiose. I was speaking to huge crowds of people, 2,000 people, and doing it high. And when I stopped, it took me a good deal of time and a good deal of introspection to be able to believe I was the same guy without that chemical assistance.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the chemical assistance when I was a kid. I had no idea that I was playing Russian roulette on a daily basis. I honestly didn't. I mean, I would see things like, when I think I was like 20 years old when Jimi Hendrix died. I was 21 years old when Jim Morrison died. Those guys were integral parts of my growing up. You know, I tried transcendental meditation to get away from drugs because the Beatles did. Not because I believed, and it didn't last very long. I was like, well, maybe if I meditate, but if I do a little bit of this, that was the situation. So I actually have the capability to have perspective, which many people in their very early sobriety, I mean, I looked at, my wife had 13 years of sobriety when I went through treatment. And I was always looking for a quicker, better way. At the end of my use, I was doing 60, 10 milligram Lortabs a day, which kills the normal individual. and today would cost you the price of a house to keep that up.
Yeah.
When I quit, I went through, I read everything because my wife had basically said, okay, because I came clean, sat down, said, this is the situation. She goes, okay, you're going to go through treatment and you're going to quit. And the alternative of losing her was not acceptable to me in any way, shape, or form. So I honestly quit because I didn't want to change my life. I didn't want to lose her. I had a really good job. I was making a lot of money. And I did this research about Keith Richards because I had read for years that he's still a heroin addict, but he goes through this process called, rapid recovery. It's basically where they put you under a general anesthetic for 24 hours, pump you full of a drug called Suboxone, and then you're not going to be able to, if you use, it will do you no good. If you use a lot to equalize it, it'll kill you.
Mm-hmm.
So literally, I went through this rapid detox. I was the CEO of a publicly held company. It was totally secret. We left on Thursday night. I went into this clinic on Friday morning. I paid them in cash, so I didn't have any checks or anything that were of record. And they put me under. And my wife left and went back to the hotel in Seattle. And 24 hours later, she came to pick me up. And the doctor took us into his office and gave my wife a bag. And in the bag was Compazine, Lomatil, all of these things. You know, if he gets an upset stomach, give him this. If he gets, including Valium. Not Valium, Librium. And we're walking out of this clinic. And my wife takes the bag and drops it in the trash. And I was like, what was that? And she goes, look, here's the deal. You're going to get sober. You're not going to do it with that crutch, period. And I was like, oh my God. And that, you got to remember the amount of drugs that I was using, regardless of the rapid detox. The one thing Keith Richards went through that I didn't was a process called plasmapheresis, where they actually wash your blood. I didn't have that. So I was in the throes of heavy duty heroin withdrawal for 2 days at that hotel. And I literally had to get on a plane on Sunday and go to work on Monday. And I got news for you. That was probably the most eye-opening, probably 2 weeks of my life, because I sweated profusely. I had the chills. I was horrible. The one advantage that I had was I was the CEO of a car wash, and it was the biggest car wash in the state of Utah. And my office was huge, and so was my bathroom. My bathroom was so big that there was like a sofa in it. So I'd go down, put in an appearance, wipe off all the sweat, put in an appearance with my employees, come back upstairs, walk into my office, lock the door, and go in the bathroom and lie down. And I did that for a full week because I worked 7 days a week. And that started on Monday. Probably the following Tuesday was the first day that I could actually feel that I could function. But once again, when you're an addict, you're also looking for the quick relief. Like, how do I deal with this? And I'm reading all this stuff, and it was all related to pills. And to this day, I don't take aspirin. I don't take Advil. The only things I take are like vitamins, supplements, and a couple of drugs that are prescribed by my doctor because I'm an old man. But other than that, nothing.
Yeah.
And I've had I had a cataract surgery done with no pain medication. I've had 3 colonoscopies with no medication. I've had 2 inguinal hernia surgeries with no pain medication, other than topicals. So they gave me enough xylocaine to numb me from my knee to my chest, and I'd go back again and have that done. And by the second day, I'm living with frozen peas on my abdomen. But I don't believe that had I not done it that way, that I wouldn't given myself permission. Well, if you do this, you do this, you do this, you do this. And I'm blessed in that regard. And with God's grace, it'll happen again tomorrow. But, you know, like you were talking about, Al, when I first went through treatment, I was looking for, okay, wind that back a second. So I get back from Seattle, and the first thing my wife says to me is, we get back Sunday night. She said, Monday morning, we're going to meet. So she went with me. I would go to work at about 7:30. So she went with me to a meeting at the Alamo Club at 6:30 in the morning. Walk in there, and I see a guy at the meeting because my wife said, you know, you're going into treatment tonight, so you need to get a sponsor. And I see a guy that owes me huge favor. So I walk up to him and I'm like, hey, I'm looking for a sponsor, buddy. This is before the meeting starts. And he goes, hey, you know what? What was your issue? You know, did you drink wine? I said, no, pain medication. He goes, Andy, I have no knowledge of that. Let me introduce you to somebody else. And he introduced me to my first sponsor was a guy named Brian Nichols. Brian was one of those kind, patient, which with me he had to be. And, you know, he talked about higher power. I said, look, you know, I've been around my wife. I know all that stuff. I don't believe in God. You know, if you're LDS, you're from here, you know what a Jack Mormon is? And yeah, I said, I'm a Jack Jew. I just, you know, that's the deal. When my bar mitzvah stopped, so did my religion. I haven't had the ability to believe in God. And he went, Andy, that's fine. He said, the biggest thing about this program is you need to believe in a power greater than yourself. I don't care if it's the sky or that rock over there. It doesn't matter. You need to have faith in something. You need to have that anchor. So I said, okay. And he said, so probably a weekend, he goes, okay, so now we're going to talk about prayer. And I said, man, I do this, you know, serenity prayer every day, you know, that's enough for me. And he goes, no, Andy, it's not. He says, if you want to progress in this program, there are 12 steps. And he says, and you're on the first one. And you have to admit to yourself that you have an issue. And in order to deal with that, you're going to need something other than just a sponsor. You're going to need to have a place you can go in your head when you don't have anybody else there. And I was like, okay, whatever. And he said, look, do me a favor. Hit your knees tonight. And I was like, wait a minute. He goes, look, you wear shoes? I go, yeah. He says, when you take your shoes off in the evening, I want you to take them off and stick them under the bed. And while you're on your knees, close your eyes, take a deep breath, and say thank you. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, you're saying thank you that you stayed sober all that day. That's all you're doing. And when you go to get those shoes out from under the bed in the morning, you say, please. That's how my spiritual journey began. You want to talk about rudimentary and getting down to basics. But God bless Brian Nichols because he gave me that ability to give myself permission. Because somewhere in the deepest resources of my soul, I must believe that prayer is only for people that are weak. And that was one of the biggest misnomers of my life. I wish that I had been able to glom onto that at a much earlier state in my life because I was 49 when I got sober.
Yeah.
So,
but you know, Andy, that was your journey though, right? That was all part of your journey with it. Cause, you know, to kind of piggyback off of that, I mean, I grew up in a LDS family.
huh?
Certain time, I don't know how old I was, my dad, something happened, I don't know. He just said, I'm done. I'm not interested. I actually continued to go. And then I had an experience at the age of 13 with a bishop. And I came home that day and I basically was talking to my dad and I says, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to go anymore. And I told him what happened. And he says, look, I'll support you either way. If you go, I'll support you, even though I don't agree with it. I'll support you, and I'll support you if you decide to go the opposite direction. And so I did. I got completely out of the church. And I, re- you know, doing my partying, I worked construction out of high school. We worked hard during the day and we partied our asses off on the weekend because that was part of the business at that time, early 80s. And we kegers every night and coke and pot and mushrooms and hash, and every once in a while acid would come, but that was one thing I never did touch because I didn't want to hallucinate. I wanted to know what was real and what wasn't. And it wasn't until I went into my 8-year weekend alcohol and cocaine use. And it was crazy when things probably got into about the 8th year. I was up at 198 pounds, most I've ever weighed all my life. I've always taken really good care of myself, stayed physical fit, used to compete in
Voted,
bodybuilding. What's that?
voted for you.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Thank you for your vote. I appreciate it. And, I remember looking in the mirrors and saying, God, please help me. Because I did. I believed in God. I believed there was a God there because I was crippled when I was a kid and I had kind of an experience that helped me realize there is something greater than me that's out there, even though I cannot see it. And he did help me. And I like to say sometimes when I do my public speaking, God has a sense of humor because he helped me because I lost my job of 24 years. I hadn't been drug tested in 15 years. Walked in one day and got drug tested. Now, when you're doing cocaine every Friday and Saturday night, you don't give your body a chance to get rid of it. It's in there all the time. And I failed the drug test and I lost my job. And I'm like, God, this is not what I was meaning, right? No, not this. It took me 2 weeks or so to get the nerve up to hit my knees for the first time since I was probably 13. And my journey the last 15 years has been such an amazing journey because it has brought me closer to God, closer to Jesus, closer to my own spiritual being than I ever was when I was going to church. For me, and I'm not saying this is for everyone, but it is for me. A lot of people who know me, when I go hiking, when I'm in the mountains, that's my church. And I have felt so many spiritual, or have seen and felt more spiritual beings, or I don't even know how to put it, there than I have ever walking inside of a building and somebody telling me I need to go there to feel God. I can feel God every day without walking into a chapel. And it changed my life, and again, that was my first thing. And I think we go through our journey, kind of like listening to your journey and what your sponsor told you, just hitting your knees when putting your shoes under the bed. That's the beginning of the whole journey because it brings us back to my version of it. It brings us back to where we need to be as human beings. Because I saw some of your bio. I mean, you give a ton back, Andy. I mean, gosh, you're a part of Make a Wish and so many different things. And I believe that's what our higher power wants us to do, right? It's more about giving than taking. And I think the more we give, the more blessings we receive. And except we have to go that path. We have to take that path to get there first.
Absolutely. There's no two ways about it. The difference between me and a number of the people I've sponsored or people I've socialized with, the, our beliefs are different. Our journey is our journey. Your
Hmm.
church, my church is music. When I'm depressed, angry, whatever, I isolate, and traditionally, in short order, I can find something that will soothe me to the point that I can move on with my day. It's just like I said, I'm not recommending that for everybody, but for me, it's what works. Putting my shoes under the bed worked. It allowed my sponsor, in his infinite wisdom, to get past my arrogance, my stubbornness, and get me to my lowest common denominator. And then, I mean, I've had some amazing experiences in sobriety. I think I was a year or two sober when I went to the International AA convention in Minneapolis. And I've had a couple of unbelievable spiritual experiences in my life that I can't explain. One was when I was 18 years old and I was at Transcendental Meditation, and I was in the Westwood office with my back to the door. And the Maharishi, the head of Transcendental Meditation, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, walked into the room. And I got this, my whole body got chills. The hair went up on the back of my neck. I had no knowledge that he had walked in the room because the people that were all coming into the room, I was the only one in there. And then a giant group was coming in with him. And I had no idea that he was going to be there that day. So that was one time. The second time was in the Metrodome in Minneapolis, Minnesota, with 50,000 people saying the Serenity Prayer. I got that exact. It was like just the most amazing emotional feeling that I mean, I get emotional talking about it now, and you're talking about 24 years ago.
Yeah.
It's just that deal. But we have to allow ourselves that luxury of changing our belief system, of changing a bit about the way we live. I mean, look, I've met more scammers in sobriety that use sobriety to scam. Well, here's me. At the time I got sober, I was speaking in front of 2,000 people, probably 4 times a year. My wife and I were on a vacation in Maui, and we, for some reason, decided to go to Oahu for the day. And we're walking in Ala Moana Park and see this deal about the Hawaiian AA convention. And it was literally right around the corner. We went, and we literally got there before their speaker. And their speaker was, do you know who Danny Trejo is, the actor?
I do not.
Okay, he's like Machete. He's just
okay, I know exactly who you mean now. Yeah, because he's been in long-term sobriety.
That's right. He's got like 50 years, 50 something years.
Yeah.
He's speaking, and I'm thinking, well, this is a great gig. I could just do this. I don't have to work anymore. I could just travel around the country and tell my story. Except for one thing, I wasn't in San Quentin. I didn't become a movie star by accident. And the funny part is, I met Danny probably at Famex. I do a lot of work with those guys, and I met Danny at Famex. And when I met him, I told him that story of going to see him in Hawaii. And he goes, was I any good? And I said, the message was amazing. He goes, oh, then I did my job. But, he wears his sobriety on his sleeve. For the first probably 6 months I was sober, I would go to work every day after going to a 6:30 AA meeting, 7 days a week at the Alamo Club. Nobody knew I was going there. I would leave at probably 11:30 to go to a 12 o'clock meeting, come back at 1:30. And then I would leave and go to a 6:30 meeting. So I was going to 3 meetings a day, probably 5 days a week, and 2 meetings a day, at least 7. So it gave me strength. I didn't have, oh gosh, I'm trying to remember when because I was so crazy about not doing my 4-step. my sponsor was going, look, I got a great idea. He said, I got to work up in Sun Valley. He says, let's drive up there and you can do your 4-step while we're driving. And I was like, okay, fine. And the morning that we were supposed to leave, I came up with some BS excuse that I wasn't doing. So when he got to Sun Valley, he called me. He says, you need to fly up here. We need to do this. No more tomorrows, no more this. And if you don't want to do it, perhaps you need to get a different sponsor. So, you know, million miler, I get on Delta Airlines on a prop plane to fly to Sun. And I've flown 3.5 million miles in my life. That was the scariest flight I've ever been on. This, I'm not lying to you. We go to land in Sun Valley, and the plane bounces off the runway and goes back around to land again. And you know, you want to talk about believing in God? You better believe in God. So I get out of the plane, and my sponsor is sitting in his dually truck outside the airport, and the dually truck is rocking back and forth because of the wind. But I got off that plane. I got down the steps, got on the ground, on my knees, kissed the ground, said, thank you, God, got back up, walked through the terminal, and walked out. And my sponsor, just in his own inimitable way, goes, how'd that work for you? So, you know, it's just like, you know, to get sober, we have to become willing. To stay sober, we have to be willing to help others do it.
Yeah.
It's work.
Yeah.
I mean, look at what you're doing. I mean, you're spreading the word. I don't do that. I mean, I don't, I talk about the fact that I'm sober constantly. I share it on social media. I don't hide any of that, but I don't live in that space that you live in, that Curtis lives in. You know, I do my good in the community in my own inimitable way. I've been involved in charities for 50 years. I'm fortunate enough to have some pretty amazing friends, and many of them, you know, dear friends with Carl Malone. Carl Malone has his own rum company, his own vodka company, his own cigar company. I do none of the above. You know, one of my best friends owns a Delta 9 gummy company called Cushq, Ryan Bowen. I don't do that stuff, but I don't try and change what others do.
Yeah.
That's the deal. There's existence in this for everybody, you know.
You know, and that is so cool that you do that, Andy, because one thing that I have found, especially in about the past year and a half, that there is, I don't know what the right word is for it, where I guess the judgment, because I've heard people in the recovery community judge somebody else's sobriety because they didn't go through what they went through as far as the program. I'll just leave it at that. We'll just say program. And it's really crazy. Now it's not everyone. It's a small percent. And it's crazy because I've had, gosh, 275 shows. I've had such a variety of people and individuals on this show who their journeys have been so different. I mean, I've had people where they got sober just because of God or because of a rock or a crystal, whatever it may be. I've had other people, you know, AA, other people who've gone through Native American type stuff, you know, people who just did it their own way, but it worked for them. And that's all that matters. I don't think when we find ourselves, I think we start finding and realizing it's not our place to tell someone else what they should or what they shouldn't do. Because if it's working for them, it's working for them, and good on them. Whether they do own their own vodka company or rum company or gummies or whatever it may be, you know, their journey's their journey. As long as we stay on our side of the street, I think
Absolutely.
life seems to be a little better.
The judgment thing, and it happens to me all the time. Like my buddy Ryan, this guy is my brother from another mother. He's my children's age. His story is unbelievable, but he has a gummy company, and I wear his hats and I wear his t-shirts. That doesn't mean that I use that stuff.
Yeah.
I the greatest success in the world because he started with nothing and sold one of his companies for $300 million year before last. The guy is an unbelievable success story. He inspires me. His spirit inspires me. His function as a parent inspires me. I don't look at anything else in his life because if we look for the positives in people's lives, but that small percentage that you were talking about, Al, looking for the negatives in people's lives to make themselves feel better, that's just not a good place to go.
No.
Not for me. Not for me.
Yeah.
So, I'm blessed. But the people I socialize with, my closest friends are my children's age. I don't have a lot of friends that are 74. Well, I have a few in California, and my younger brother's a year younger than me, and we talk 6 times a week. But other than that, the people I socialize with are 52, 41, 47, 43, and 50. The people that I see constantly.
Mm-hmm.
Absy I see all the time, but not the way I used to. I mean, we were like every other day. Now he's so busy that we'll talk a couple times a week. That's it. But once again, I had people who regularly use pain meds. I would do my thing saying, careful, don't do that. You don't want to be like me. But I'm not a whore in church. I'm not holier than, and I don't believe it's my place to tell people how to live their lives, because the one thing that still pisses me off is when people tell me how to live mine.
Yeah.
And I'm wholly open to that fact. That's a flaw in my character, whatever you want to call it. I'd rather just be happy for people that are successful, especially people that had a hard road to get where they're going. And in recovery, good God, I've met so many amazing people that went from having everything to being homeless to losing all their teeth and having to totally rebuild their lives, that have done that. Those are my heroes.
Yeah.
We all do this, whether we admit it or not. We say, well, what would I have done in that situation? How would I have dealt with that? And I'm an honest guy. I'm like, I wouldn't have made it. I'd have been dead. And if you look at the amount of chemicals that I consumed by any other situation, I should be dead. I should have been dead a long time ago. When I was a kid, we were playing music and producing music and hanging out. I remember thinking to myself, being an old man is going to be like 55. I don't think that way right
now. Yeah. Yeah. It changes, doesn't it?
When I work at one of my first gigs was a record producer, and my boss was 40. And he had all these gold records on. And I went to work for him, and he goes, here's what we're going to have you do. You're going to do this and do that. Great. I was like, the Energizer Bunny. Yeah, just put me in the studio. Let me have music and let me do my thing. And, things were totally different then. Totally different. People did albums for $10,000. Now they break wind and it's $100,000. Oh, we got to do this TikTok video, but we're going to produce it. It's insane in that business. And yet I remember looking at this guy like, old man, get out of my way.
Yeah.
And my brother and I share the thought that the older we get, the wiser our father was. Things that my dad used to say constantly is like, here's the deal. You may not believe me, but you're not blessed with time. And I remember him telling me I was like 17 and a half years old. I couldn't wait to be 18, you know. And I was like, just stop. And when my first child was born, who's 50 now, my dad came over, and because it wasn't a boy, you know, we're Jewish, because it wasn't a boy, he didn't rush. She was 2 weeks old before he saw her. And he looked at her in the bassinet, and he says, son, he says, today, she's a baby. Snap your fingers. She'll be in grammar school. She'll be in junior high. She'll be in high school. She'll be married. She'll have kids of her own. I'm like, wait a minute. I'm like 23 years old. What are you doing?
Yeah, right.
I'm trying to buy a house right now. Why are you doing this? And he goes, pay attention. And I look at the perfect example is at 73, almost 74 years old. I got up this morning. I looked at my calendar. I realized, oh my God, we're halfway through May. Halfway through May of 2020. I'm going to be 75 next year, and it's going to happen like that. And then I'll be going, uh-oh, 80's coming soon. It's that reality. But if I wasn't sober, I wouldn't be there. I wouldn't have that ability to look at it that way.
Yeah. Well, and just being blessed to be where you're at. You know, when I hit 60 last year, you know, I had some people teasing me a little bit about it, you know, which is fine. I mean, they're just having a good time, and I'm taking it. And they're like, well, what does it feel like to be 60? And you know, I don't know. I'm guessing it's the same for you. I still feel like I'm young. I still feel like I'm a kid, even though our bodies tell us a little bit differently. However, I am so blessed and so grateful. I mean, here in what? Yeah, it's almost June. So here in about 2 months, I'm going to be 61. And I tell people, I'm like, I'm freaking grateful because I had friends who did not get the privilege to make this age. They're no longer with us.
Yeah.
I am so grateful to be here, you know, because um, and talking about how fast life goes, when I had my first granddaughter, I mean, this was such an amazing thing for me. And I'm going, okay, well, here I am. I'm in my 40s, or actually my 50s, and here I am, a papa, which was amazing. Then I have two more grandkids, and it's just like yesterday I was holding them like this. My oldest granddaughter is going to be 13 this year.
Mine's going to be 20.
See, I see 20. So see how quick it goes. I mean, 29.
20.
Oh my gosh. You know, and my youngest granddaughter, I took her out for her birthday to go birthday shopping, and I I said, "So sweetie, how does it feel to be 10?" She goes, "Papa, I've been so excited to hit double digits. I am so happy." And I'm like, "Sweetie," I says, "you enjoy it right now. Enjoy the heck out of it." Because I says, when you get older, you may look at things differently, but I says, man, just absorb it, take it all in. Be thrilled that you're in double digits, because those double digits get higher, right? But yeah, just
Well,
to be great.
I'd be fine with that. If I could make the triple digits, I'd be good.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, I just don't know if it's in the cards. I mean, I'm doing all the stuff now that I never did when I was, I mean, my life has been a reverse thing, right?
Yeah.
I was rich when I was young, and I'm broke as being old. It should have been the other way around. 360 pounds when I was 37 years old, and I weigh 180 today. Um, I didn't, I mean, I played college sports, I played high school sports, but I was always making deals. Hey, coach, if I make 5 tackles, can I not run the track? I mean, it was, I was always a negotiator to make that easier path go. And that's what that's the other thing about drugs is it, you know, if you were depressed, you could do something. You know, if you were happy, you could get happier. You know, all of those things are things that I remember fondly. I don't remember them the same way many of my cohorts do. But the magic I talked about, maybe a year sober in Minneapolis with my wife and meeting people that had 50 years sober. They did a thing called the Sobriety Countdown in the Metrodome with 50,000 people there. There were people on the stage that went to meetings with Bill Wilson. I mean, it was phenomenal. It was unbelievable. And the spirituality, it was like a happy zone. Everywhere they had events for AA, people had smiles on their faces. And God is my witness, my wife will attest to this. We walked out of the happy zone because there was a pizza parlor we had heard about. And literally we're walking down the street and nobody's smiling. And it's stuck with me. I'm going back to where people are. You know what I mean? It's just that part. It was just, I'm glad that my wife talked me into doing it because I really wasn't into it. And then we had such a good time. And I met people from Salt Lake that my wife knew or that another friend of hers from AA knew. And bingo, those people started going to me. I started going to meetings they went to see them more often. And I mean, you know, heard amazing stories. A guy that was a FedEx pilot that flew drunk every day. And the first time he wasn't drunk is the only time he got reprimanded.
Oh, geez.
Go figure. And you know, I don't know. I've been, you know, I'm not a big reader. I don't read a lot of books, but I've been listening to two particular books. One was Phil Collins. And I mean, you're talking about a guy who's got Grammys, Oscars, you name it, songs, platinum records, and all. Almost drank himself to death at the end of his career. Yeah. Eric Clapton, same thing, in the middle of his career. And then to the point where Eric Clapton even has his own recovery center that he funded in the Caribbean. So, you know, it just, it never ceases to amaze me that there are people who I've met in the program that are not in acceptance and not grateful for a whole bunch of anything. I'm grateful that I can stand vertical and fog up a mirror in the morning, and that's a great start.
Yes.
You know, the other thing that sponsor taught me when I get into the poor me situation, he'd go, "I've got an exercise for you." He said, "What are you grateful for right now?" I said, "Not a damn thing." He said, "Do you have a roof over your head?" "Yep." "Are you grateful for that?" "I don't know." "You should be, because that guy over there isn't, and he doesn't have one, and he'd give anything to have the roof over your head." He said, "From the looks of your waistline, you eat. Imagine the people that don't." And you know, he expanded and expanded to the point of, I think he was doing it, you know, to make me feel that I had to start thinking about stuff, thinking that if I was to be grateful, I had to show it. You know, my license plate for 25 years has been GRAATFL, grateful. And I have people, "Oh, Grateful Dead." No, gratitude. In gratitude, I'm sober, and I have absolutely no problem sharing that. But that and the shirts that I wear get more comments than anything else that I do. So, you know, it's pretty crazy. But you know what you do, Al, is a necessity, and you're to be commended for doing stuff like this. My buddy Casey Scott has a recovery podcast, and I mean, the thing is, I knew Casey throughout his issues. I knew him when he got fired from Channel 2, he got fired from Channel 5. he's a testament, but he doesn't. He's not a 12-stepper, you know. But stay sober however you can. That's the greatest thing. And try and help others to do that. And what you're doing is to be commended, because that's what you're doing. You're trying to get the word out there. You're trying to give people hope. And you can't do a greater thing than that. So if that's to be your epitaph, it's a pretty good.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. And yeah, Casey has an amazing podcast, Project Recovery. I had the honor of being on his show just as C-19 was hitting. We had to separate. We couldn't even take our pictures together. We had to kind of separate at that time. And I spoke to him at the Mascot Miracle thing fundraiser that they had just not too long ago. Phenomenal man, and has done a lot and still doing a lot, which he hasn't responded to me. I've reached out to him a little bit on see if we can get back on his show to promote our Healing Utah Success Summit, because we're taking more time this year to help promote that, to really get the word out. Instead of trying to do it within a 2 to 3 month time frame, we decided to use 10 months to help get this thing going. And we're really at the point now where we're really starting to wanting to market the crap out of it. Matter of fact, I'll be on Good Things Utah on Tuesday. And
Oh, I love those guys. I mean,
they're amazing, aren't they?
thing. Nesia DeGering, I met her when she first started because her producer was a gal named Roxanne Hasagawa, and John Apsey and myself and Eldon Farnsworth, Mark Eaton, were all part of this organization called Firemen and Friends for Kids, which still exists, but was on the board with us. And she was the first producer of Good Things Utah. So I met Nesia way back. And the thing about that gal, unbelievable. Sue Ray, they're all great. But
yes, they are.
Nesia is one of my absolute, I just love that gal. And so, yeah, tell her I said hi.
I will, and hopefully she'll be there, because the last few times, because Good Things Utah was bringing me on every quarter.
Are you doing it?
When is it?
When are you doing
next Tuesday, the 21st.
work on Tuesday?
Oh, well, it'll be recorded. I'll end up putting it on my Facebook. But yeah, she's not been able to be there the last few times that we've been on it. So we're really hoping that she'll be there on this one, because she really enjoys what we're doing. The first time we had the opportunity to be in on Good Things Utah to promote our St. George, our very first event, she opened up offset a little bit about what had happened in her life, and that's not for me to share on this, but yeah, just an amazing woman, great personality, and
if you want, I can absolutely help you. If you want to get on Fresh Living on Channel 2, I can do that as well.
Oh my gosh, if you could do that, because I just reached out to them and they got back with me. They want $950 for us to come on, and I'm like, we don't have that in our budget. We just want to come on and promote an amazing event that's going to help inspire and educate individuals, because our whole event's about addiction recovery, suicide, and domestic violence.
I just did the 100-mile walk with John and Tracy Gossett, to the walk to Wendover.
Yeah.
And we did both shows. We did Fresh Living, and we did Good Things Utah. And John and Tracy have a shop out in Tooele, and they're doing these high-end hat bars. And Nisi is coming out on the 3rd to do that with us. So yeah, let me talk to the powers that be over at Channel 2.
If you could, man, we would be so grateful, because Good Things Utah, all we do is reach out to them and they bring us on.
Channel 2 is a dear friend. His name is Kent Crawford. Kent is the Western Regional VP of Sinclair Broadcasting, and he's got, I believe, 30 TV stations under his purview. Like here, he's over KUTV, he's over KJazz, and he's over KMYU. So he has 3 stations, because The other thing about Fresh Living is it airs on all three of those stations, plus on their YouTube and their website. So yeah, let me make some calls. Send me all the information out, and
Okay.
happy to speak to those people for you. But you know, these are people that are content driven, and this kind of thing, anything as far as suicide goes, I mean, I do a lot of stuff with vets, and you know, I got to be honest with you, Utah has a whole bunch of things going on. But I mean, you think about youth suicide here in Utah. You think about what I think it was year before last, Harriman High was one of the highest in the country.
Yes, it was. Yes.
Those things to me are unacceptable, period.
Yep. I agree 100%.
So let me see what I can do to help.
Okay. Well, we'll chat as soon as we get off this show. I'll chat with you just for a quick second on that. And so, Andy, is there any last words you'd like to share to our audience?
The only one I've pretty much already said it is that there is hope, but the biggest blockade in front of us is ourselves. Once we became willing, we can get ahead of it. I've had some pretty unique situations in my life. I was a millionaire when I got sober, and I went broke while I was sober and didn't use. So we have to learn to use the tools that have been given to us. That's the biggest thing. And then, you know, just try and be grateful on a daily basis for the little things. And there's so many little things that we can be grateful for that sometimes if we can get occupied by that, the big things that are making us crazy go away or fade into the background. That's it.
That is, I got goosebumps, brother. I
God,
mean, seriously, that's well said.
this thing, spreading the word is absolutely unequivocally necessary to get the word out there. And what you're doing is great. I'm envious of you. I wish that I had the constitution to do it, but and God bless people like you, Casey, guys like that. Spread the word, Curtis, all those guys. You're all my heroes.
Thank you,
Okay.
sir. Well, you're doing a lot of amazing things yourself. Yeah, when I saw your bio, man, you're giving so much back, and so thank you for doing that because we need individuals like that also to help make a change and make a difference in our community. So thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, guys, again, thank you for supporting the other side of addiction. We greatly appreciate it. Again, this show wouldn't been going 3 years if it wasn't for you. You guys are the ones that are making this all possible. All our guests are making it possible. Our past sponsors. Guys, we love and appreciate you. And quick plug, man, mark your calendars, October 5th. It seems like it's going a long ways away, but it's really not. It's going to be here in a blink of an eye. October 5th at the Miller Free Enterprise Building. We've got our 4th Healing Utah Success Summit with 5 amazing speakers that's going to be coming on. Guys, have a wonderful day. And remember this, addiction is giving up everything for one thing, and recovery is giving up one thing for everything. We're out.